is providing the speakers for 5D. So let me turn it over to Nick M.
He's taken on a big renovation of Patricia and Ross, demoing the house with the help of his firefighter colleagues. Down to one income, money's been ruined since they started paying for their son's cancer treatments.
Also, could everybody mute themselves who's not supposed to be talking?
So far, we've repaired the roof, removed asbestos.
Nick, are you there?
Hello guys, yeah, I'm here.
Hi, are you our speaker for this evening?
No, I'm a different Nick. I'm not the speaker.
Okay.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, Nick.
Awesome. I just switched over to my computer.
Awesome, go ahead.
I guess my phone isn't working. But anyways, I'm Nick. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
What's up, Nick?
Thank you guys for having me out. This is the first time I've ever actually been on an online meeting, so it's kind of weird, but pretty cool.
Can somebody do something about the feedback? Are you logged in twice?
Nope.
Nick?
Oh yeah, I guess it was echoing. Can you guys hear me better now?
I hope so.
Okay, cool. So I guess I'll just get into it. A little bit about me. I grew up in Ventura, California. That's where I'm from, which is what VICI-PAW stands for, Ventura County Young People's in AA. And so I grew up in a home where my mom was one of us, and so was my dad. My dad was in and out of treatment centers and in and out of jails and all that stuff. From the day I was born, he was shooting dope in the hospital, and by the time I was about 8 years old, he had got deported for selling and using meth. My mom was on and off sober for the better first half of my life, and right around the time that my dad left, she decided to get loaded again, and so it was on and off from there. And the thing is none of that makes me an alcoholic, but that was just my experience growing up. Is I always felt a little bit different from the kids around me. Pretty blessed. I grew up in an area that's pretty nice, and most kids have both their parents, and that just wasn't my story, and so from a very young age, I felt very apart from. So when I started drinking and using, all the feelings of feeling apart from, feeling like I was different, and feeling all these normal human emotions, it went away. And for the first time in my life, like I was able to walk through like happy and peaceful and joyful, and I fell in love with drugs and alcohol. And I remember the first time I read the book, my sponsor had pointed out to me the things. I came into AA and I felt like it was only for alcoholics. I actually went out before, in previous sobrieties, thinking that I wasn't an alcoholic. I was only a drug addict, or only a drug addict, or not an alcoholic. And I thought those two things were separate. The first time I actually sat down with a sponsor and in the book, he explained to me that Bill Wilson, part of his story is that he, used to drink gin and sedative. And there's a few other stories in the book where people, take sedatives and different forms of drugs, and that most people that land up in Alcoholics Anonymous are afflicted with more than just one addiction, and that's okay. So my life was riddled with drug addiction and alcoholism, and I started off using when I was about 12 years old. I took my first drink and I absolutely loved it. I remember just being on the verge of throwing up and being like, this this is awesome. I want to live this way for the rest of my life. So I'm sure a few of you guys can relate. And by the time I got sober or was leading up to it, it had progressed so much from just that one drink that, I was on probation in 2 different counties. I was trying to run away to Mexico, and my life was completely in shambles. I had lost everyone that I had ever cared about or loved, and I felt completely alone. In the meantime, like I told you, I got into a little bit of legal trouble and hurt a lot of people. And the girl that I'd like to say that I was in love with at the time, I hurt her a lot, and I used a lot of drugs and alcohol behind her back while she shot heroin behind mine. It was a very unhealthy relationship, and so I had all this wreckage in my life, and so by the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd experienced a lot of powerlessness. I tried to get sober so many times, and I told the girl, and I told the mom, and I told different people in my life. This was the last time. I talk about this a lot, is that if you would have strapped a lie detector to me and I told people those things, it would have shown that I was telling the truth. I believed it myself. I wanted it for myself, but the problem came is that within a couple of days I was always loaded again. My sponsor explained to me that my problem was the mental state preceding that first drink. I had made a decision to stay sober, and for some reason I just kept on getting loaded. So this last time that I came in, I felt like I had already kind of done step 1. I felt like I had really admitted the powerlessness. But the problem was for me is understanding how my life was unmanageable. I knew that it was unmanageable while powerless or while getting loaded, but the problem was for me is my sponsor really stressed this, is that my life was still unmanageable even when I wasn't loaded. And my problem wasn't drugs and alcohol, my problem was me. And my issue always became, once I got rid of the drugs and alcohol, I didn't like me. I didn't like interacting with other people, and I couldn't find love for myself, and I just wasn't happy, and I didn't enjoy life. And so I got sober when I was really young. I got sober at 16 years old. I'm actually 20 years old right now, and I'm taking 4 years sober in May. And I only spent a couple of years using, but I was miserable by the end of it. My sponsor really stressed to me this time that for you to stay sober, you need to find fulfillment. You need to find happiness. And that's what this whole God thing is about, is finding that. The whole being of service thing is finding the purpose and finding fulfillment. Stop being so damn selfish. I was just reading over some step 3 stuff with the guy I'm taking through the work right now. We were talking about examples of selfishness and self-centeredness and all these different things. And I'm really grateful that I get to do that. I feel like every time I read over through step 3, I see ways that I'm still trying to manage and control other people and things in my life. But my sponsor expressed to me that if I were to stay sober, I had to quit playing God, and I had to stop playing the victim, and I had to stop being so self-pitiful, and I had to put my big boy pants on and go try and help somebody. Stop thinking about how the world and its people are going to benefit me. And so in step 3, I was pretty convinced that I was screwed. I had no other option besides God. My life that I had run it up until the moment where I got into AA was in complete shambles. I didn't know how to run my life. So I only had one other option, and it was to go to God. And what that really looked like for me was pretty much just doing everything that the people in AA told me to do. Get typical, go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps. And I went through my steps as fast as possible. My belief is that, is what the book says, is that pretty much the process of doing the steps is, and the goal of it is to try and remove my character defects so that I lose the obsession to drink. So once that started to happen, and I did the inventory, and I got honest and open with another man, I didn't have any secrets left to hide, and we really picked apart these defects of character. Once I did that inventory, once I did my fist up with my sponsor, it was pretty clear to me, to him, and to anyone who pretty much was around. getting in the way of every single aspect of my life. My only option was to remove it by the use of God. And so slowly over time, my experience with the character defects is that, when I honestly and humbly go to God and ask him for these things to be removed, like manipulation and the need to control and the selfishness and all these things, and I ask God, or for my ego, and I'm praying and I'm just like, yo, God, please remove my ego, and grant me with humbleness and humility so that I can better serve the people around me. It's not just I'm in the situation and I'm like, oh, I know better, I should act differently this time. My experience has been that I'm in the situation and automatically, without a thought or really much of an effort on my part, God grants me the ability to practice that contrary action. And so, slowly over time, over the past 3.5, 4 years, I've started to become a better person. And because of that, along with the process of doing my amends, the relationships in my life got healed, and got better and better and better. My relationships with, my entire family is that of love. I have a fellowship of men and women in my life, where, I actually just went up to a young people's conference this weekend in Sacramento. It was the All of California Young People's and Alcoholics Anonymous, and our committee, we just kind of started up again. We've been going for a couple of years, but we weren't really doing much. In this past 6 months, we've really started to throw events and do fun stuff, and we've had like 130 people at each one of our events. It's been amazing. I'm really grateful to be a part of it. But we had 13 members of our committee drive all the way up to Sacramento over the weekend, and we put in a token bid to try and take Akipod at Ventura. And over this weekend, a lot of us didn't really know each other. A lot of us, have not really even crossed paths in the room much. And we had a unity event a couple weeks ago, and we got closer. And my belief is that really over this weekend, we became a family. We spent nights drinking, shotgunning energy drinks and playing young people's games and listening to these amazing speakers from all around the country. It was just truly amazing. That would not have been possible without God and without not being such a shitty guy. Nobody wanted to be around me before. I got a minute or two left, and I want to be conscious of everyone else's time. But once I got through the steps, through the first 9 steps, my sponsor told me in 10, I needed to continue that process of continuing to remove the stuff that blocked me off from God. And then in 11, to continue to build and grow my relationship with God through prayer and meditation. And the last thing was that I needed to take other guys through the work, be of service, and try and practice all this stuff in all my affairs. Sponsorship and service work have been such a crucial and important role in my sobriety. And I'm gonna tell this one story, and then I'll shut up. I think I told you guys, my mom is one of us, and she tried to take her own life about 1.5 years, 2 years into sobriety, and it was really hard for me. The day before that, 2 days before my mom tried to take her own life, I had a breakup with the girl I had been with for 3 years because she couldn't stop shooting heroin. Everybody in my life was telling me I needed to stop. So that was on a Thursday. That Friday, I went to a young people's event in Santa Barbara, and while I was there, I got a call late at night saying my mom tried to take her own life. The next morning, I was in the hospital with her, and she handed me her suicide letter. And so the only reason why I'm still alive is because I did the math wrong on the amount of medication I took. It was heartbreaking. It really was. After everything that was going on that weekend, it was really heartbreaking. AA was always there for me, and I truly believe God made this happen as I started working with a guy a week or so before, and he called me right as I was leaving the hospital for my mom, and I was in complete self-pity. I was feeling down, and he calls me. He's like, hey, dude, can we read the book together? And we started to have that connection that I'm sure most of you guys have had with another alcoholic, where he looked at me and he felt like he got me, and he started to see himself in the book, and he found a little bit of hope. And I got to experience watching the light in this kid's eyes turn on, and not feeling like maybe he doesn't have to live this way of life anymore. And I didn't tell him about what's going on with me. He had no idea that I needed that way more than he did in that moment. But he saved my life that day. And and maybe I wouldn't have gotten loaded, but when I walked out of that meeting with him, I felt closer to God. I had a faith that maybe everything wasn't going to be okay, or I'm sorry, maybe everything wasn't just going to be solved and fixed, but I knew that everything was going to be okay, that God, Alcoholics Anonymous, and my sponsor and my friends and my sponsees were all going to be there for me no matter what. And, you know, my mom's still not sober or anything, and the girl's still shooting heroin. I'm so glad I'm out of that relationship. But my experience now is I have this unshakable faith in God that no matter what, as long as I'm willing and I honestly seek God and try and find an answer and grow closer to AA, God will always show up every single time, as long as I'm willing to seek His word. So once again, thank you guys so much for having me out here to speak on your online meeting. I think this is so cool. So with that, that's all I have. Thanks.